Hello, I'm Simon Whistler. You're watching TopTenzNet, and in the video today, the top 10 books and movies that were inspired by dreams. Dreams are a combination of pictures and stories that develop in our minds while we sleep. Dreams can be about literally anything from something funny to romantic or even terrifying. While 95% of dreams are usually not remembered, it is believed that people dream anywhere from 3 to 6 times per night, with each one lasting between 5 and 20 minutes. While most dreams are never remembered, some people do recall specific details about them, and on a few rare occasions, people have been inspired by what they dreamed of to make something in the real world. As a matter of fact, some great creations were developed from actual dreams. For example, the melody for the Beatles song Yesterday was inspired by a dream. Paul McCartney woke up one morning with a tune stuck in his head that he did not recognize, so he composed the chords for it on the piano, and it became the music for one of the most famous songs of all time. Another example is that of Edgar Allan Poe's poetry. It has been said that many of his poems and short stories were inspired by the many nightmares that he suffered from throughout his life. There are also several famous books and movies that were inspired by actual dreams, 10 of which we're looking at in today's video. Number 10. E.B. White's Stuart Little. The beloved children's story of a mouse named Stuart Little was inspired by a dream that E.B. White had in the 1920s. The anything-but-ordinary mouse was born into a family of humans in New York City and lived with his parents, his older brother George, and a cat named Snowbell. While White had the dream in the 1920s, it was only put into a novel in 1945. While he was sleeping on a train, White dreamt of a little boy who looked and acted a lot like a mouse. He wrote a few episodes about the boy mouse and put them away with the intent of sharing the stories one day with his nieces and nephews. But around 20 years later, his story became a bestseller and even inspired the 1999 hit movie Stuart Little, which starred Michael J. Fox as the voice of the mouse. Number 9. Sophie's Choice by William Styron. In the mid-1970s, William Styron was struggling to come up with ideas to write another book. That's when he experienced a dream that would inspire him to write Sophie's Choice. He described the dream as a merging from the dream to a conscious vision and a memory of this girl named Sophie. And it was powerful because I lay there in bed with the abrupt knowledge that I was going to deal with this work of fiction. His vision of Sophie was that of her entering the hallway of this humble boarding house in Flatbush with a book under her arm, looking very beautiful in the middle of summer with a sort of summer dress on and her arm bared and the tattoo visible. He felt like he had to write the Holocaust-themed story, and in 1982 an acclaimed movie was made starring Meryl Streep as Sophie. Number 8. Christopher Nolan's Inception. The 2010 psychological thriller Inception, a movie that in itself is about dreams, was inspired by actual dreams. Christopher Nolan took the idea for the movie from his own lucid dreams. The film stars Leonardo DiCaprio as a talented thief who is very skilled at stealing secrets from people while they are dreaming. A new job, however, requires him to plant an idea inside the mind of a man instead of simply stealing an idea. Nolan claims that Inception was an elusive dream. He said, "I wanted to do this for a very long time. It's something I've thought about off and on since I was about 16. He also mentioned that ever since he was a kid, he was fascinated by how he would wake up and then fall back into a lighter sleep, but still know that he was dreaming, and even managed to examine the location of his dreams. Number 7. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde is a novel written in the 1800s by Robert Louis Stevenson. It is about a man who has a split personality, the good Dr. Jekyll and the terrible Mr. Hyde. It is said that Stevenson was fascinated with split personality disorder, but was unable to figure out how to put it into writing. However, one night he dreamt about the characters. "In the small hours of one morning, I was awakened by cries of horror from Louis," his wife Fanny explained. "Thinking he had a nightmare, I awakened him. He said angrily, 'Why did you wake me? I was dreaming a fine bogey tale.'" Stevenson was apparently sick with tuberculosis and under doctor's orders to rest when he wrote the novel. He produced the first draft of 30,000 words in 3 to 6 days, followed by a second rewritten copy in just 3 more days. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde sold 40,000 copies in just 6 months, followed by over 250,000 copies in North America. His novel also inspired several movies over the years. Number 6. Stephen King's Dreamcatcher. In 1999, Stephen King was hit by a minivan when he was walking down a road in Maine. During the time that he was recovering from a shattered leg and a collapsed lung, he started to have vivid dreams, which inspired him to write his horror novel Dreamcatcher. The novel is about 4 friends who reunite in the woods each year for their annual hunting trip. But one year, a stranger ends up at their camp, all confused and muttering about lights in the sky. The friends are then faced with a terrifying creature from another world and need to figure out how to survive. He was quoted telling the San Francisco Chronicle, "The first really strong idea that occurred to me after the accident was 4 guys in a cabin in the woods. Then you introduce this one guy who staggers into the camp saying, 'I don't feel well,' and he brings this awful hitchhiker with him. I dreamed a lot about that cabin and those guys in it." The novel was turned into a movie in 2003, which featured a who's who of both on- and off-camera talent, including Morgan Freeman. Number 5. Stephen King's Misery. Not surprisingly, Stephen King came up with the idea for his horror novel Misery from a Nightmare. It is about a famous author who is rescued from a car crash by his #1 fan. However, he soon realizes that the crazy fan has other ideas in store for him that include abuse and captivity. King was quoted saying, "Like the ideas for some of my other novels that came to me in a dream. In fact, it happened when I was on Concorde, flying over here to Brown's, a hotel in England. I fell asleep on the plane and dreamt about a woman who held a writer prisoner and killed him, skinned him, fed the remains to her pig, and bound his novel in human skin. I said to myself, I have to write this story." And that's exactly what he did. He wrote the first 40 or 50 pages on the landing between the ground level and the first floor of his hotel. While his book was published in 1987, the movie Misery was released in 1990, starring James Caan and Kathy Bates. Number 4. Jason Mott's The Returned. The Returned is a novel written by Jason Mott about an elderly couple who have a government agent show up at their home with their son. The only thing is that their son drowned 50 years ago on his 8th birthday. The boy looks and acts the same, but there's no possible way that it could be their deceased son. Or could it? In an interview with CNN, Mott described the idea of how the book came to him in a dream about his deceased mother. "In the summer of 2010, I had this dream that I came home from work one day and found my mother sitting at the kitchen table waiting for me." He went on to say, "I came in and sat down with her, and we just talked about everything that had happened since her death." He explained, "It was one of these really vivid dreams where you wake up and question whether it was real or not." He wrote a short story about a couple whose son returns from the dead and received a great response to it, so he continued writing it, and a year later he had finished the manuscript, which turned out to be a bestseller. It was later turned into a television series. Number 3. James Cameron's Terminator. The 1984 hit movie The Terminator starred Arnold Schwarzenegger as a futuristic cyborg sent back in time to assassinate a woman whose unborn son will lead humans in a war against machines. The director and writer of the movie, James Cameron, was staying at a hotel in Rome while working on Piranha 2, The Spawning, when a horrible flu and high fever hit him, causing him to have nightmares. In fact, he dreamt of a chrome torso appearing from an explosion and dragging itself with kitchen knives across the floor right towards him. He recalled when he came up with the idea for Terminator, "I was sick at the time, I had a high fever. I was just lying on the bed thinking and came up with all this bizarre imagery. I think also had the idea that because I was in a foreign city by myself and I felt very dissociated from humanity in general, it was very easy to project myself into these 2 characters from the future who were out of sync, out of time, out of place." Number 2. Stephenie Meyer's Twilight. Twilight is the story of a modern-day love triangle between a vampire, a werewolf, and a human. The idea for the book came to author Stephenie Meyer in a dream. She explained her dream by saying, "It was 2 people in a kind of little circular meadow with really bright sunlight, and one of them was a beautiful, sparkly boy, and one was just a girl who was human and normal, and they were having this conversation. The boy was a vampire, which is so bizarre that I'd be dreaming about vampires, and he was trying to explain to her how much he cared about her, and yet at the same time how much he wanted to kill her." Prior to being a best-selling author, Meyer was a stay-at-home mother who was an avid reader but was never a writer. At first, she documented the dream so that she would remember it with no expectation of making it into a novel. But after 9 rejections, her dream became a reality, and her story is now known throughout the world through her Twilight books and movies. Number 1. Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. In 1816, Mary Godwin and her fiancé, Percy Shelley, visited Lord Byron's residence in Switzerland. During stormy nights, Lord Byron, who was a poet, would get his guests to read ghost stories to each other. One night, he asked his guests to write down their own horror stories. After the request, this is what Mary claimed happened to her. When I placed my head upon my pillow, I did not sleep, nor could I be said to think. I saw with shut eyes, but acute mental vision. I saw the pale student of unhallowed arts kneeling beside the thing that he had put together. I saw the hideous phantasm of a man stretched out, and then, on the working of some power engine, show signs of life and stir with an uneasy, half-vital motion. She described in great detail the dream that frightened her that night, the dream that inspired her famous novel, Frankenstein. So I really hope you enjoyed that video, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel for brand new videos every day of the week. Also, I've got another channel, it's called Biographics. It's biographies of notable people from the present day, as well as history from Elon Musk to Osama bin Laden. You can check it out through the icon on the screen now. But if you want something else to watch right now, why not check out another TopTenz video or a Biographics video over there on the right. And as always, thank you for watching.